That would look sexy, holy shit. Fuck it. It's expensive. Fuck. That would look good. Oh, that would look good too. I'm looking up graphics cards. That's 400. Do I want a red and black? I'm going off looks right now, but I'm gonna look up the graphics card and see how well it is. So let's just try this one first. It's the RTX 270, 8GB. 3.1 graphics card. I don't know the terminology of that, so let's find out.
So guys, I know what the title of this video says, but I want to sit down and have a heart-to-heart talk about the RTX 2080 and the RTX 2080 Ti launch. Don't worry, I will talk about the RTX 2070 a little bit later on in the video, but I want to dial back a few days, or I just want to dial back and talk about this particular launch that took place.
Okay, I don't care about
takes them to heart. There's been a lot of questions from our audience about how well the custom GTX 1080 Ti cards from board partners stack up to the RTX 2080. It actually got me and the rest of the team wondering if moving outside the Founders Edition spec would change the results. Well, we're gonna find out, but not with something like the GTX 1080 Ti Strix OC or Zotac Amp Edition GPUs, since both of those cost even more than the RTX 2080 Founders Edition on Newegg and Amazon right now. They also represent the absolute highest pre-overclock spec of a previous generation design, and using those would just serve to stack the deck both positively and negatively. So what we did is order a more affordable custom and pre-overclocked EVGA GTX 1080 Ti that will be compared against the RTX 2080. It will be interesting to see how the two cards stack up when both have downdraft coolers. Anyways, that's the end of this public message. You spoke, we listened, and as usual, we really appreciate the feedback. So now on to... Okay, so back when NVIDIA first announced the RTX 2080 Ti and the RTX 2080, there was another little surprise, the RTX 2070. This is actually the first time that there were 3 different GPUs at 3 different price points that were announced, and it showed NVIDIA was ready to replace their entire high-end GPU lineup. Not only that, but they were replacing them with products that are much more expensive. That's a pretty big problem since it automatically sets expectations based on what looks like inflated prices rather than the merits of the GPUs themselves. Let's quickly go through the RTX 2070 specifications since they will set the stage for the rest of this video. This is what NVIDIA is calling their TU106 core, and right away people will make an association with the GP106 core that was used in the GTX 1060. Back then, the GTX 1070 and 1070 Ti used a cut-down GP104 core from the GTX 1080, but this time around NVIDIA decided to build a brand new design for the RTX 2070. In this case, it means that the RTX 2070 will get a fully enabled TU106 core with 2,304 CUDA cores, 144 texture units, 64 ROPs, and a 256-bit wide memory bus. In many ways, this looks like a GTX 2080 core that's simply been cut in half,
totally
but with memory controllers,
no
L3 cache, and ROPs remaining intact for the bigger GPU. I can't say this for certain, but it looks like the main reason NVIDIA designed a new chip for the RTX 2070 was power efficiency. Instead of needing to use the power-hungry 215-watt TU104 as a baseline, the standard RTX 20...
What can I use for the motherboard I have? Maybe that's it. I need to, fuck, what was it, the ASRock B450 M Pro 4.
Traveling for business doesn't have to feel like work. Get 5 times points on flights and prepaid hotels.
Good.
And get access.
Not good.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another
Sup,
DGF video. Today we're
man?
going to be taking a look at the B450 Gaming K4 motherboard from ASRock. Now, instead of just taking a look at the board and leaving it there, we're going to do that, and also we built a system based around this motherboard. We've paired it with a Ryzen 5 2600, so this is more than just a gaming rig. You can use this for like a sort of entry-level
Need a
editing
fucking
system and
haircut.
so on. So what we'll do is we'll look at the board first, and then we'll cover the gear and sort of go over the build
It's
that
getting a little
we've done.
ridiculous.
Before we start the build, let's take a look at ASRock's new B450 Gaming K4 motherboard. With B450, we have similar features to X470 with 2nd gen Ryzen 2 support straight out of the box. XFR2 technology, Precision Boost and AMD Store MI storage acceleration has also made the jump over to the B450 chipset. The Gaming K4 features a 9-phase power design, and I have been told that this is broken down to 6 phases for CPU and 3 phases for the SoC. VRM cooling on the board looks adequate, but nothing really to brag about. Also, the lack of an I/O cover really gives the board an old-fashioned look. I guess we're so used to these covers now that boards without them just don't seem to be the norm. Memory support, we see up to 3200 MHz plus OC with a max capacity
I like
of
the
64
subtleness of
GB. As Ryzen is quite sensitive to certain memory modules, I recommend heading to ASRock's website, which outlines
it's
the appropriate
obviously not the
speeds
best.
and ranks. The board supports up to 16 PCIe Gen 2
I might even
lanes,
get
just like
another
on
board
X470,
instead.
but with the second 16x slot locked in at 4x. You'll only have crossfire support.
But-
That's if you game enough to run your second card at 4x speeds. It's also worth noting that if running a Raven Ridge CPU, say a 2400G, the two 16x PCIe slots will run at 8x and 4x. We also see 6 general purpose chipset PCIe Gen 2 lanes with support for just
Okay, I
6
think
USB 3.1
That's what I... wait.
at 4x speeds. It's also worth noting that if running a Raven Ridge CPU, say a 2400G, the two 16x PCIe slots will run at 8x and 4x. We also see 6 general purpose chipset PCIe Gen 2 lanes with support for just 6 USB 3.1 Gen 1 ports, 2 front and 4 rear. There's also 2 USB 3.1 Gen 2 ports, a Type A and C on the rear, but no internal Type C header for front chassis I/O. Storage is pretty good with a total of 6 SATA 3, 4 off the chipset and 2 running off an ASMedia ASM1061 controller. 2 NVMe slots can be found, one running at 32 gigabits with the second supporting both PCI and SATA modules running up to 16 gigabits. It's also worth noting that the first M.2 slot is shared with the second 16x PCIe slot, which means one will be disabled if using the other. If using a Raven Ridge processor, you'll be able to take advantage of the board's display outputs. On the Gaming K4, there's the inclusion of HDMI, D-Sub and DisplayPort version 1.2. Max resolution you'll be able to achieve is via the DisplayPort at 4K at 60Hz. Once again, we see the old pesky D-Sub port hanging around. To me, I don't find a need for it, but others may. Other features on the board include a Realtek ALC892 audio codec, which is pretty common on the...
I should go best. For 2,300, Jesus. Okay. Sure. Okay. But I also, that's right, I have the smaller case too, so I'm kind of limited there. 'Cause not all boards have the same, or, you know, have all sizes. guess.
Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. Today we're checking out my favourite B450 motherboards. It's another top 5 video, and the categories for this one include Best Ultra Cheap, Best Value All-Rounder, Best of the Best, so no compromises sort of option there, Best Micro ATX, and Best Mini ITX. So let's get into it. At the time of making this video, the most affordable B450 boards are coming in around $70 US, while the cheapest B350 boards are about $10 cheaper. So once B350 stock runs out, you can expect the B450 models to drop down a little bit in price. Right now we have ASRock, MSI and Gigabyte all offering entry-level boards. ASUS does have, well, an entry-level board, but in typical ASUS fashion, their version costs about 30% more with no justification for the price premium. So, we have the ASRock B450M HDV, the MSI B450M Pro 2, and the Gigabyte B450M DS3H. Since Gigabyte spent their entire budget on chokes that they don't actually need, we're going to ignore the DS3H, which is a shame because that board does pack 4 DIMM slots, but given their VRM woes on the B450 boards, I just can't touch them or recommend them at this point. Then we have ASRock's entry-level board, which looks much better and packs a similar VRM configuration to that of the flagship ASUS and Gigabyte B450 boards, which is a bit embarrassing for ASUS and Gigabyte. The same is also true for the MSI B450M Pro 2, but I'm going to pick the ASRock board because it features a heatsink on the VCore VRM. Other than that though, the ASRock and MSI boards are really similar, so if you can't get your hands on the ASRock board, then the MSI board will make for a nice backup. I also prefer ASRock's UEFI design, so their BIOS. I just think the layout and feature set's a lot better than that of MSI's, and in my opinion this is one area where MSI does need to up their game. Overall though, solid entry levels from both ASRock and MSI, but I think the ASRock board will be sort of the perfect entry level option, and it will work nicely with a Ryzen 7 2700X. That said, if you do plan on overclocking, I highly recommend you spend a little bit more money and at least get our best value all-rounder pick. So
yeah, I'm not going to overclock with this. You know.
If possible, I recommend avoiding the entry-level boards and just pony up an extra $40 US. I realise that is a pretty big step up in price, but you do get a significantly higher quality motherboard that'll handle any Ryzen CPU throw at it with ease. The extra investment will also open you up to multiple options, and the best include the ASRock B450 Gaming K4, the MSI B450 Gaming Plus, and my personal favourite, the MSI B450 Tomahawk. The options from ASUS and Gigabyte not really good enough to consider in my opinion, which is why I'm only mentioning boards from ASRock and MSI. For me though, the MSI B450 Tomahawk is the standout here. It packs an impressive feature set, and at $110 US, it can't be beat, at least in my opinion. It's also a nice neutral looking board in terms of its design, whereas the previous Tomahawk had some red highlights and whatever. MSI's just gone for a black-grey theme this time, and with a dash of RGB lighting it will suit all occasions. That said, if you can afford it, our no compromise option, which is just $20 more, I know it's another bump up in price, but frankly it is worth every penny, but we'll get to that one in a moment. Still, if you're stretching the budget as it is, the Tomahawk is a reasonable compromise and really a great board for the mid-range. You essentially get everything you'd need or typically want from a desktop motherboard, with the addition of a high quality VRM that operates at safe temperatures, even with an overclocked Ryzen 7 processor. It's great to see that MSI didn't skimp on the VRM components, and they certainly didn't skimp on the cooling either, providing nice big heatsinks on both the VCore and SoC VRM, and the best bit is the heatsinks haven't been covered in some tacky looking plastic shroud. So if you can stretch your budget to about $100 US, then I highly recommend checking out the MSI B450 Tomahawk. It really is hands down the best value all-rounder. I don't think there'll be many that can argue with that.
Interested in Hyundai Santa Fe Sport? You might want to consider the 2018 Ford Edge Sport.
AMD recently launched the B450 chipset for their new Ryzen 2 CPUs, which gives us a nice option under the X470 motherboards. For my first B450 board, we'll be taking a look at the MSI Tomahawk and seeing what features it's got to offer. RGB lighting toward the top right hand side, and this can be controlled using MSI's LightSync software. In total, there are about 10
That's all that
different
matters. The RGB.
PS2 port, 2 USB 2.0 Type A ports, DVI-D and HDMI 1.4 outputs, which are only usable if you're using an APU with Vega graphics, 2 USB 3.1 Gen 1 Type A ports, Gigabit Ethernet port, USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type A and Type C ports, followed by the audio ports using Realtek ALC892. There's also this black and white I/O shield included. At the center of the board is the AM4 socket, which supports both AMD's new Ryzen 2 CPUs, but is also compatible with the first generation too. And for my testing, I'm using the Ryzen 7 2700 CPU with the stock cooler. Next to the socket are the 4 memory slots, which run in dual channel, and can support up to 64GB of memory at DDR4 2666 speeds. In my system, I'm just running 2 8GB sticks, as it's what I've got available, and with overclocking, you can run up to DDR4 3466. I've heard that with the second generation of Ryzen, memory support has been improved, so compared to say B350, you should have better luck with memory overclocking. But as mentioned, I don't have any exciting memory, so wasn't able to test that out. As for the PCIe slots, from the top down, there's a PCIe 3.0 slot with X16 speed, although if you're using Vega graphics from an APU, then you're looking at X8 speed, and this top slot is also reinforced with metal. The rest of the slots are all PCIe 2.0, and we've got 3 X1 slots, and another X16 slot, although it's only wired for X4 speed, giving us support for two-way crossfire, no mention of SLI though. Just above the PCIe slots is the single M.2 slot, which is another change from the B350 version, which had it covered by a graphics card in the top PCIe slot.
I need to fucking learn my shit. Oh my gosh. Okay. How does motherboards work? Linus, like it.
What is a motherboard? Motherboard? Like when she tells that story that I've heard like 100 times about...
True!
I just wish she'd stop coming to...
Fuck, I love Linus.
Ha! That's a joke. No, where the CPU or the central processing unit is colloquially referred to as the brain of a PC, the motherboard or the main board is often described as the backbone. It's the component in a PC, and for that matter, pretty much any other electronic device, whether it's a game console, CE device, a piece of industrial equipment, or a cell phone, that contains all the slots that everything else goes into. Alright, so how do I find it? Well, that's usually pretty easy because it's the largest PCB or printed circuit board inside the device, and it's covered in slots, connectors, chips, and other electronic doodads. At its very core, a motherboard is just a bare PCB and contains no actual processing power. It relies on other processors like the CPU and GPU, which are sometimes socketed in and at other times soldered on directly to perform all of the actual work and give life to your device. But that doesn't make it simple. Motherboard designers are tasked not with creating a simple platform onto which everything else will be stuck like Lego, but rather with crafting an infrastructure for some of the fastest and most delicate electronics imaginable. Even though the majority of the other components used in the system aren't manufactured by the motherboard maker, they are responsible often for choosing these components for their placement and configuration and making sure that every signal will be sent where it's needed, interpreted correctly, then passed to where it needs to go, and all of this without excess interference. Even something as seemingly trivial as a single trace that's a little bit too long can cause one electrical signal to be a little bit late and another a little bit early and cause instability. That's why you'll sometimes see little zigzag patterns in the traces on a PCB. Those aren't for beauty, they're not for looks. Everything about a motherboard is highly functional. A motherboard also isn't purely hardware either. There's a software or firmware component. On a PC, this is referred to as a BIOS or UEFI, and is often the difference between a good motherboard and a great motherboard. This software acts as a way for the manufacturer to correct small bugs that are inevitable with something so complex, and to add functionality in the future. It also serves as a way for the user to alter settings or tweak them for optimal functionality. On consumer electronics, this software component also exists, but it's normally not user accessible. Alright, so what if my motherboard dies, which might even be why you're sitting here watching this video? Well, for consumer electronics and phones and whatnot, you're often hooped. If you can find a new one, there are often extremely fragile cables and connectors attached to them, and if you can't find a detailed guide on a site like iFixit, for example, I would recommend leaving it to the pros. For a PC, life is a bit simpler. Many PCs use industry-standard components, including the motherboard, but many others use proprietary and expensive alternatives. So the only way to find out for sure is to contact your manufacturer directly, but there's a good chance that you'll be able to get your hands on something. Once you've got a new one, replacing a PC motherboard is, in many cases, not difficult, but it can be time-consuming and tedious, and will usually involve removing pretty much every other component in the system in order to extract it and replace it. The good news is you can check out one of the excellent PC build guides on my other channel, and that'll tell you pretty much everything you need to know about installing a motherboard. Any other questions you might have can likely be answered on the LinusTechTips.com forum, where people are friendly and happy to help. Speaking of friendly and happy to help, Hotspot Shield takes special care of our community members and has been not only a sponsor of our videos, but also a supporter of the users we refer to them. Complaints and questions from folks on the Linus Tech Tips forum are easy for me to escalate and get resolved. So, I guess that's great, but what exactly is Hotspot Shield, you might ask? Well, it's an easy-to-use VPN service, which is basically a way of obscuring your IP from the sites you're visiting. This can be helpful if you want to make your footsteps more difficult to track, if you want to keep others from...
Alright. Well... either way, it is what it is, and... I might get the new motherboard, like the IMS, I mean, the only reason why I'm saying that is just because the one that I grabbed was like, it was like only $100, so like, you know, it would be a good backup motherboard, but what did he say? I think it's only like 100 and, AMS or ISM? Fucks. Alright. Oh well. I'll figure it out tomorrow. Thank fuck I have a half day tomorrow. Like work and shit. Fuck. I need to get back into like fucking doing this, having fun, learning shit. Work is just so fucking ugh. But it's bringing in the money, so for now it is what it is. So without it, I wouldn't be able to be building this PC. So I'm saying so a lot. That's really obnoxious. But anyways, I'll catch you guys later. Always keep it real. Always keep it fresh. Smoking Fox out. Peace. That's so fucking stupid.